Hey guys, and welcome to this week's Sabbath School Short. My name is Andrew, and I'm so excited that you are here with me today to look at the next lesson. And this lesson is number 8, and it's titled Jesus, the Mediator of the New Covenant. And the memory text for this week is found in Hebrews chapter 8, verse 6, and it says this: "But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is as much more excellent than the old, as the covenant he mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises." We're going to be unpacking that a little bit, talking a little bit more about what that exactly means and how Jesus is the mediator of this new covenant that God has given to us. But so in order for us to fully understand the new, we have to take a look at the old, which is what Sunday's lesson kind of unpacks. It's called the need of a new covenant. Why was the new covenant necessary? What was wrong with the old one? Was there actually anything wrong with it? After all, God did give it. It raises some issues, right? But Sunday's lesson does a really good job of kind of unpacking that and discussing it a little bit more. And it says this is one of the short little quotes I just wanted to bring out. It says, "The issue with the old covenant was that it could not provide perfection." The necessary thing to get into heaven, honestly, hasn't changed. It's that we need to be righteous. We need to be holy. We need to return back to the original state that God created Adam and Eve in. They were perfect. They were holy. They were blameless. They were righteous. Sin was not within them. And that is the necessary things for us to be in contact with God, because God is so holy and perfect. It's like light and dark, right? When the light comes into the darkness is expelled, right? Darkness cannot exist in light. It's kind of the same understanding with sin and God. Sin can't exist where God is. God's presence naturally eliminates the darkness. And so God has a dilemma. He wants to be with us, but we have to be perfect to be in his presence. Otherwise, his presence wipes us out, right? Which is what the purpose of the old covenant was, the whole sanctuary and everything. Build a tabernacle so I may dwell with my people. But the old covenant could not provide that perfection. But it kind of makes God look unfair. Why would he give this thing if it didn't work? It didn't meet the necessary qualifications. Well, look at this quote that's also in Sunday's lesson. It says this: "The fact that a new covenant was necessary does not mean that God was unfair with Israel when he gave them the old covenant. The Levitical ministry and the services of the tabernacle were designed to protect them from idolatry and also to point them to Jesus' future ministry. Hebrews stresses that the sacrifices were a shadow of the good things to come." The sacrificial system, the old covenant, all of these things that we read about in the Old Testament were designed to protect Israel from idolatry. You have to understand the culture that God gave this system, this old covenant to. The culture of this was a very, very pagan world. There were a lot of other gods that were around them. All the nations around Israel, they were serving other gods. In fact, God chose Israel to be a light to the nations. He says that in the Old Testament, that Israel was supposed to shine forth, that God was the true God. But all these other nations around were very pagan, and the sacrificial system, honestly, was also very rampant around. There were a lot of different religions that had sacrificial systems in place. But God put this in place, put the sanctuary so that he may dwell with them, so that he could protect them from all those false gods and all those false things. He wanted to give them the truth and be with them and protect them. And not only that, he used this to foreshadow the ministry of Jesus, the Messiah that would be to come, to be the Lamb, to be the sacrifice that we could never be, to protect them from idolatry, and to foreshadow the ministry of Jesus Christ. God was not unfair, and Monday's lesson highlights this with this quote too. It says this in Monday's lesson: "The issue with the old covenant was that the people broke it. The covenant was not faulty. The problem wasn't with the covenant. The people were. If Israel had seen through the symbols to the coming Messiah and put their faith in him, the covenant would not have been broken." And so the issue wasn't with the old covenant. The issue was the people. And this applies to us today. We still mess up in the new covenant. The problem is not the covenant. The problem is not with God, it's with us. The problem is not with how God has set forth the plan of salvation. The problem is us. We mess up daily. We fall short every day. But that's where the mercy and grace comes through. And that's what the old covenant was too. When you were to mess up, you were to bring the lamb and sacrifice the lamb and trust and have faith in the system that God had put in place, that now you are righteous and now you are clean, so that God could dwell with you. It's that same thing for us today with Jesus Christ. That's why he's the mediator of this new covenant, that now he is our lamb, and now he takes our sin away from us and declares us to be righteous in the Father's sight, so that we can boldly go before him, not having to fear anything, because we know that we are holy, blameless, and righteous in his sight because of what Jesus has done for us. And that's where the faith comes in, that even though we may not feel holy, we may not feel righteous. I have just messed up already this morning. You know what I mean? We all mess up daily, but it's because of the words that Jesus has spoken over our lives, and that he is mediating on our behalf, that we are holy and blameless in the sight of the Father. And we put our faith and trust in those promises. That makes us holy. That makes us righteous. We accept what God has already done on our behalf. And Thursday's lesson unpacks this a little bit more. It's called "The New Covenant Has Resolved the Heart Problem." Tuesday and Wednesday's lesson talks about how there's better promises in the new covenant. But Thursday's lesson really gets to the heart of the sin problem, because it's maybe a hard pill to swallow. It was for me when I first understood this. Sin is not an action problem. We do that so many times. We treat sin as if it's all about actions. We treat sin as if it was all about the things that we do. That's not what sin is. Sin is about the heart. And that's what Jesus was trying to say on the Sermon on the Mount. He said, you say that murdering people is wrong, and that's true. But I say to you that if you hate a brother in your heart, you have committed murder. You say you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that if you look at a woman lustfully, you have committed adultery in your heart. Jesus is trying to communicate, the Bible communicates that sin is a heart issue. It's not about just your actions, because let me tell you something, you can have all the right actions, you can be doing all the right things and still be so far from the presence of God. But this new covenant solves the heart issue. Because the issue of sin is a heart problem. And God wants to create a new heart within us, and that's what this new covenant is. Jeremiah 31:33, the lesson references this verse. It says this: "This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people." You see, God is after the heart. God is after not just a change of behavior. God is after a change of nature. Because sin is a nature problem. The nature of my state is that I'm in rebellion against God. There's this thing within me that is waging war against my mind of what I know to be true. And it's telling me, hey, don't trust that. Run away from God. But God says, listen, I want to change your character. I want to change your very nature with my grace. And when we accept that, grace, change is sure to come, because grace without change is perversion. This good news is so good that it invokes a change within our hearts, a change that invites us to be drawn closer to the very presence of God. The relationship is what God is after. He's after your heart. He's after you because he wants to be in relationship with you, because he loves you so much. And when we enter into that new covenant of that relationship, he begins the process for us of cleaning out our heart, of cleaning out our lives, and restoring within us the image of Christ. And that is a process that is going to take all through eternity, of our lives at least. Once he comes again, he'll be able to wipe sin completely away, right? All of our lives, we're going to be growing in the salvation that he offers. That's called sanctification. But the good news is that where we fail, there is grace. And that's what that new covenant is. Look at this quote in Thursday's lesson. It says this: Jeremiah did not announce a change of the law, because the problem of Israel was not the law, but the heart. God wanted Israel's faithfulness to be a grateful response to what he had done for them. The new covenant that Jesus is mediating, he's looking to change our hearts. And this is good news. This is amazing news. Because when the heart is not changed, but we decide to change our behaviors, it just becomes a ritualistic religion that doesn't bring life, it brings death. The Sabbath loses its beauty. Church loses its excitement. All these things that we do, they lose their power when Jesus is not at the center of them, when our heart has not been changed. But the good news is that Jesus is after to change your heart, so that instead of forcing yourself to having to do these things, you start to see a shift, you start to see a change, and you start to love to do them because you see that the Sabbath is a day of rest for you to spend with Jesus, to put away all the distractions and to spend it with Jesus. You start to see that church is about a fellowship of believers trying to make a difference in the world, to go out into the community, to share about the love of Jesus Christ, and to spread his good news. You start to see all these different things in a new light. You start to see prayer as an opportunity for you to talk with the God who loves you with an everlasting love. You start to see the devotional life as a time to spend in God's word, to get to know him better so that you can walk with him more effectively because you know who he is. You start to see all of these things as an opportunity to strengthen your relationship with Jesus, because at the core of the gospel, it's about a relationship between you and God. And Jesus has paved the way for you to have that relationship as he mediates that new covenant. Because God is writing his laws on our minds and on our hearts so that we start listening to him out of love. Because we've seen just how much he loves us. And the only natural response to that is to love him with everything we've got.